Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. We are going to be talking about halachic infertility tonight. We haven't done a live in a while, and I am really excited though about bringing to our audience this incredibly important topic. This is a topic that is not really very much discussed in the Jewish world, but it is something that many people in our world do struggle with. And so I am thrilled to be bringing Jenna Sharp on tonight, and here she comes. I'm going to grab her right now. We'll be talking all about it. It is, it's frankly unusual to get somebody to talk about their own personal struggles hi Jenna, when they're actually still going through it. But Jenna actually approached me. Once I said that we were going to be talking about this topic, Jenna approached me and said, I want to talk about it. I talk about it already in my real life, and I want other people to know about it. And so here we are. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank God. Thank God. Okay, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell people who you are, tell people a little bit about you, and then we'll get right into this. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Jenna Sharp. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I am a teacher for our public school system over here, and been married now for about, 8 years. But I've been with my husband for a very long time because we met in college. So, but right now we're just through the challenges that we've dealt with. We've dealt with miscarriages, but now we're dealing with halachic infertility, whereas my cycle kind of went from every 30 days to now every 25 days. So we're like missing that window. So we're just kind of trying to figure out how to go about that within the frum community, from talking to different rabbis to talking to fertility doctors to my OB. So just another part of this fertility journey that we've been on.
Okay, so thank you. I'm really so indebted to you for opening yourself up and talking about this in this public way. I know that, you talk about this in your own life, but let's just rewind for everybody, and start a little bit from the beginning. Tell me, you mentioned to me that you and your husband are both Balei Tshuva, which means that you didn't grow up religious. I also didn't grow up religious. I think a lot of people know that. If you didn't, I've just shared that. Not a secret. And I know that that's going to play a part in this story as well. So I think it's important to mention. But just tell me, growing up, about your families, in college, the way the two of you met, and then just bring us through your marriage and the beginning of this piece of your life. And I'll intersperse with some questions also.
Please. Okay. So, I grew up around the Baltimore area, and so did my husband. We actually had the same friend circles in high school, even though we went to two separate high schools, but didn't end up meeting until college. So my family is very Reform, or as you say, in terms of their Judaism, we went to maybe synagogue for the high holidays, and any sort of holiday celebration was really just gathered around just food and coming together. So there wasn't so much, meaning behind most of it. My husband was a little bit more connected, and then I think about in high school, my mom started to push for to join some organizations that were Jewish. There's different ones like BBYO or NCSY, all these, fun organizations. But because I was in high school, I didn't want to do what my mom wanted me to do. So I didn't until I got to college. And then my cousins were involved with an organization called Mayor, and they all did it and went through it and loved it. So they were like, oh, you get some money from it. You might as well try. So it's like, okay, fine. I'll do something for a semester, get some money out of it, and then I'll just go on with my life. It didn't end up working out that way. The majority of my friends from college were made from there, and then I ended up going on my first trip to Israel. I was going through, this is more, but I was going through a lot of depression issues, and just, I think the meaning behind everything in, Judaism just kind of was why why was I going through this depression when there's meaning in every little aspect? So I kind of, got onto the train of being frum, and, went from that.
And just explain for a second. Being frum meaning becoming more religious, starting to keep more of the traditions and Jewish law.
Right. I think I came back and was like, I'm going to only eat kosher meat. And like, it's just little bits here and there. And I think at some point I met my husband through all of this, and he was on the same journey as well. So we started dating in college, and we were both part of that organization called Mayor. And then once he graduated before me and went to yeshiva, so we went to Israel to learn some more. And we would like reconnect every summer to just make sure that we were on the same page. And then once I graduated, then I went to Israel, and then we ended up getting engaged then and getting married. So we were together for like almost 2 or 3 years before we got married. And then we, trying to think how like the process of everything else happened. But I guess after like the first couple of years of our marriage, maybe 2, we started trying. I was going through a lot of stress with my work situation, so we pushed it off a little bit. But then once we started trying, it took maybe like 9 months to conceive the first time around. And then we had an early miscarriage with that one. And then it only took like a couple of months to conceive again. And then that turned into a miscarriage as well. They were both like very early, but still like, as I did not know what to do. I wasn't seeing an OB at the time. I was seeing a gynecologist, and she had a friend who worked for Shady Grove Fertility at the time. So she ran some tests, and they didn't find nothing going on. So she was just like, all right, well, continue to keep trying. And then we did for a year. Nothing happened. So we went and we did some tests, and nothing was found again. And then, thank God, after like another couple months, we conceived our son that we have that's now 4. But that took, a lot of that took a lot out of us, or at least out of me. So I was dealing with a lot of like postpartum anxiety after that. And from that, I didn't really want to start trying for another like 2 years, probably. And we conceived after like the 2nd month of trying. And this was during the start of the pandemic. So my husband didn't go to any appointments with me. And then I went to just a regular appointment, I think like a 17-week checkup. And that's when there was no heartbeat. So then I had to go in for a D&E, dilation and evacuation. And at that point, I just, I was like, I didn't know what, I've already went through the miscarriages before, and then now I'm dealing with one, like the 2nd trimester, when they didn't find anything. But at that point, I kind of, not that I knew my body, but I kind of had an idea of what happened to my body after the losses before. So after this loss, my cycle went from every 30 days and just automatically went to 25. I think for my previous losses, it took a while to get my cycle. Like it went, I think for like 2 months, and then it kept going back down until it got to 30. But this automatically went to 25. And it was very odd. And so, and my cycle was just weird. Like I would get my period for like 5 days, and then start like my 7 clean days, and I'd get my period kind of like again after 2 or 3 days.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, because I want to just explain for the people who don't know, and we're just going to go back and I'm going to talk about what halachic infertility is. We've spoken about it a little, but I want to make sure to do it here so that everyone is on the same page. So when we talk about halachic infertility, so halacha or halachic is Jewish law, and halachic infertility means that there's some aspect of Jewish law that's causing the infertility. So what does that mean? That's like just a very weird kind of like just way of describing infertility. What does that exactly mean? So, and Jenna, please jump in at any point. Okay, please. So basically, according to Jewish law, when a woman, from the time that a woman gets her period to the time that she then is allowed to then be with her husband is generally around 12 days. And what that means is because from the time that a woman gets her period, when she sees blood, she has to separate from her husband and she can't be intimate with him. And then what Jewish law says is that even if you just see a drop of blood, there has to be a 5-day waiting period until the woman can then start counting what we call clean days. Then you need 7 clean days in order to be able to then dip in a ritual bath and then be able to be with your husband. And so, generally speaking, a woman's period, let's say someone starts bleeding, generally speaking, someone's period, someone's cycle, the heaviest of those bleeding days, or most of those bleeding days, are usually around 5 days. So a typical cycle for someone would be, yes, you bleed for 5 days, then you have your 7 clean days, and then you can get to the mikvah and then be intimate with your husband. You can have sex with your husband on day 12 of your cycle. And for the average woman whose cycle is 28 days, then what that means is the average woman then ovulates around day 14. So being intimate, starting to have sex with your husband around day 12 is great because you are able to hit that window of when you ovulate. And so that means you have the ability even to get pregnant. When we talk about halachic infertility, what it means is that there's something off with the woman's cycle in that either that it's shortened the way Jenna is talking about, in that the whole cycle is shortened. And if the whole cycle is shortened, we know then someone's not ovulating on day 14. They're going to be ovulating on day 12, day 11, day 10, day 9, somewhere in that window. But according to Jewish law, if you can't even have sex with your husband until day 12, but you're ovulating before day 12, then you're totally missing that window. And so that's when we talk about halachic infertility, that's what we mean. That Jewish law is saying you can't be with your husband until day 12, but you're missing that window. Did I explain that right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what was happening. But it's interesting because I had gotten to a point, I guess, after everything that I had gone through, that I think after my second miscarriage, is like, I'm done being quiet. Like, let's just, not that I'm telling the world, but I can't keep quiet about this anymore. So I kind of got to the point where once I was noticing that weird like cycle shift, that I automatically sent my OB a message. I was like, this is weird. I'm not too sure if like something, there's still something in me that you didn't get out from the dilation and evacuation. I don't know. So thank God, I also have thyroid stuff going on. So yep. I got blood tests to just check on my thyroid, and then I got another ultrasound just to double check everything was fine, and they got everything. My levels were good, which they were. So I kind of started, I think after the first couple months, like, we're staying at 25 days. This is really, like, sometimes 24. It's like, this is really weird. So I wanted to just double check where my body was. So I personally started ovulation testing just to see that I was, and that like nothing else changed, because you never know after any loss, your body just really does shift and
totally
in different ways.
Totally,
So,
which is very, very normal. Very normal.
Right. And I was like, oh, well, maybe my body will just like, I don't know how it would jump forward. That's the thing. Like, you could go I started from longer before to shorter, but I've never gone from like short to longer. So I was noticing I was ovulating on days like 9 and 10. So we talked to our rabbi, forwarded us over to the assistant rabbi at our shul at home, and he's very knowledgeable. So we were talking to him about things, and it ended up being that because of my like issues with getting to the mikvah, because of the extra bleeding, there were some some different ways that I could, like, I guess a leniency in a sense,
yep.
that I could follow to get to the mikvah sooner. So as Aimee was saying, that, well, during that time after your 5-day period where you have to do what's called like a 7-day kind of like a clean days. Yep. And normally during that time you would wear white underwear, and check, like, there's a cloth that you like check to make sure that there's no blood still within you. And I think at that point he was like, let's just go ahead. You're going to wear black underwear for those 7 days. It's okay if you have this amount of blood. You're only going to check on days 1 and day 7. And that was at the beginning. And I was still having difficulty. So I reached out to my OB again. He's like, okay, well, let's just try a couple different medications. So then it got to the point where I think we were prescribed letrozole, which was first. The way that it's really interesting, the way that a woman's cycle works is that there's stages. So the medications that they prescribe they try to make sure that it delays ovulation by extending the stage before that.
Yep.
So we tried that. That didn't, and we tried that for months at different aspects of the cycle, like days 5 to 9 or days, and it didn't really do anything.
So it was the same. It didn't change anything at all.
Yeah, my ovulation was the same. Didn't change anything, and we tried various time frames just to make sure. Oh, maybe you're just not taking it at the right point in your cycle. So that didn't work. So then we went back to the drawing board, and at that point we checked back into this rabbi. And he was like, well, because you already tried one medication and that didn't really work, you can start checking. So instead of that day 5 window, you can start checking to make sure like you're kind of done bleeding on day 4. So like a day earlier. So that was a little bit tricky. I don't know that many people who don't have a cycle that's like that short.
Yeah.
So, but a couple months I was getting there, and then we switched to a different medication, which was estradiol.
Okay.
So that medication did push my cycle longer, but I started noticing as I was testing that my ovulation wasn't like reaching like peaks anymore. It wasn't getting as high. So I was going from 25 days to 40 days, but the ovulation was still like not right. Something was not working right there. So and we tried that for a very long time also, and it got to the point where I sent a message to my OB, and I was like, these aren't working, and it's been over a year. Like, shit. I mean, maybe I'm not being patient enough, but at this point I already know from the past with dealing with Shady Grove that like if you haven't gotten pregnant in a year, right, that you can go back. So I was like, maybe I'll just give them a call again. So I went back to Shady Grove, and we're at the process right now where we're kind of like finishing the like baseline screening and everything. Thank God nothing has been found in terms of fertility. So the next step is to try Clomid, and then
a third medication.
Right. And then if that doesn't work, then we would go the route of an IUI. And I mean, I was saying this to you earlier.
And explain, hold on, before you get there, explain to people what an IUI is, and then I want to add something to that.
So I guess an IUI in a sense is taking a sample from your husband, and they insert it during that time when you are ovulating. They'll insert it into you. I haven't had issues with getting pregnant until now. I've had my losses, but not this. Like, this is new. So the only thing is that I just want to be, I'm very thankful that I have a job, that I have insurance, that I could pay for those things. But, it does get to a point where you're like, I'm going to go on a third medication for something that is technically just because of Jewish law, that is not, there's not really much, hopefully, God willing, there's not much wrong with my body. It's just the time frame is just not working with that aspect.
Right. So I'm just gonna pause you for 1 second there. I think that this is actually the crux of the issue here, and I this bears discussion, right? There is nothing halachic infertility, by very definition, is that the cycle, your cycle is working fine, a person's cycle is working fine, and that there is enough sperm and that everything is fine from the man's side also. And there's no problem with the sperm actually getting to where the egg is. The problem is that the timing is off. And the timing is off specifically because Jewish law says that you can't be intimate at a time when, for certain people like Jenna, that's your fertile window. And that's the issue. It's a halachic, it's a Jewish law problem, as opposed to an actual medical problem. And I want to just go further, and just to describe why, we know that the Jewish law problem is that one can't be intimate with your husband before you're allowed to be, before you get to the mikvah. So then the question is why are these treatments allowed, even though they're at a time when you're not supposed to be intimate? I'm wondering if the rabbi or the rabbis had an explanation for you about that. So I know that's what everybody's question is here.
It is interesting. I think we haven't gotten to that point yet, that we haven't been like, well, I don't understand why that would be allowed. I guess I'm not too sure, to be honest with you, because we're at the point where, when I went back to Shady Grove over the summer just to start the process again, I didn't even have to say anything. And they were like, oh, your cycle looks like you're not meeting the mikvah in time and this and that. So, it's a whole process. But I don't think we've gotten to it. It got to the point where this time around was the first time we were like, I guess we should check off all of our boxes. And last time around, we didn't end up having, my husband didn't end up doing like an analysis on his, like a semen sample. And
Right.
This time around, I was like, let's just do it because, we want to check off all these boxes. And that was the first time that we had to ask, all those questions about how you would even do that within Jewish law also. So we haven't gotten to the point where we have asked a rabbi, because
Right.
We're going to try Clomid first. But it is interesting, like, why you would be allowed to do
Right.
that during that window.
Right. And I see here, someone saying that, her rabbi told them that they can't do an IUI until they go to the mikvah. I will tell you that there are, I know that, because these are questions that I get asked frequently, or do an embryo transfer. I see that she's asking, so you still need to delay your ovulation. That is not what all rabbis hold. There are many rabbis. I want to be very careful with the way I say this. There are obviously in Jewish law, because Judaism is such where you have, how many rabbis does it take to change a light bulb? 2 rabbis with 3 opinions. So let's just call it what it is at this point. There are many opinions here. There are some opinions that say that even if someone doesn't get to the mikvah, that any kind of fertility treatment is allowed, whether it's an IUI or an embryo transfer, that there's absolutely no problem doing any of those things, even if you don't get to the mikvah. And there are other rabbis that rule differently, that say that you do need to get to the mikvah in order to do any kind of the IUIs or an embryo transfer. So, these are things that one has to discuss with their own rabbis. And as with all things, what I always recommend to people is just make sure that you're speaking to people who are specifically versed and who are specifically trained in this area, in the same way that, you wouldn't go to your, regular doctor for heart surgery. You would go to a heart surgeon. You want to make sure that you're going and speaking to a rabbi who has specific expertise and knowledge in fertility treatments and timing. So I love the way the person just said there, like, ask your local Orthodox rabbi.
Right.
Yes, but.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Because we started this process of asking. So our rabbi kind of put us, no, he kind of takes like a little hiatus over the summer. So when we started like dealing with this, he was like, well, I can answer you, but, you know, our assistant rabbi is, you know, more available. Plus he's also more knowledgeable in this area. So we've been talking to him, and he also, I know with my husband, they're, you know, semi-close. They talk fairly often. So I know recently he's also sent him some information about different organizations. There's like Taharenu, and there's so many different, you know, there are people who this is, you know, different rabbis or different, and people who are, this is their job to learn about the Jewish law in this area. We went back, I talked to we're still close with, so when we got married, when you get married, you have like a kala, a bride kind of teacher, and a groom teacher, you know, kala chesed teachers. They just talk to you about all this aspect within getting married with the mikvah and everything else. And so we were talking to them about it also, and they were saying that, you know, they're always learning as well, and they do a lot of classes on like mikvah.org, and her husband, who did my husband's classes, had just had like a 2-week, you know, information training lessons or classes on halachic infertility, and it was like the first time that he was getting, you know, a lot more information on it, right? Which is great, but you really, you know, you could ask your LOR, but at the same time, they might not be knowledgeable in that area.
Correct.
So you have to
what I would say is ask your local rabbi if they're knowledgeable in this area, and if they're not, then ask them to refer you out, or I'm happy for people to always reach out to us, and we're happy to point you in the right direction of someone who can be that person for you. But I want to go back now, and can we talk about your emotions? Like, you and I spoke about the fact that, you know, this is, you were not, like, why did I have you in the beginning talk about your background? Because you did not grow up religious. Your husband did not grow up religious. And so this very infertility is not because your bodies are not working. It's because Jewish law says that you can't be together around your most fertile window. And I'm imagining that brought up a lot for you, and possibly a lot for your husband. How do you explain this to your families? Like, can you tell us a little bit about that?
But as I've mentioned, so my family's very confused by it. And I know, like, my mom, my dad, we don't really talk about it that much. But my mom is just, she, like, does not know what to do about that information. And she's just like, okay, not okay with it, but she's just like, I don't understand. And she also uses it as like, oh, so you're at Shady Grove now, so what's going on? Like, it's always like, that's a process. But for me, my family's never been we never like grew up very like emotional, lovey-dovey. Like, we're just not that kind of family. So when we were going through, not that I, you know, did not feel sad or upset about this, but the emotion that really, like, I more or less latched onto was anger. It's like, okay, well, I went through these challenges already. I went through the losses, and yes, that, like, I couldn't handle them, but, like, I'm moving past it. Okay, not past it, but moving forward, trying to.
Right.
So, you know, when this challenge came along, it's just like, what else do you want from me? You know, at least to Hashem, it's like, I chose this life. I'm observing mitzvahs. You know, my 4-year-old son is in a Jewish school, which, like, obviously I wasn't growing up, and neither was my husband. And, you know, we're doing this and that, and, you know, it's not, there's no, like, formula, like, if I pray this or if I pray that. But it got to the point where I was like, I wasn't really praying anymore. I mean, I'm not so much right now either, because I'm still a little, you know, I still have my anger here and there, but you know, it got to the point where I just didn't want to, you know, be a part of Shabbos or be a part of, like, the holidays weren't fun anymore. Like, it just, you know, I just didn't want to be a part of the religious community. So it was very hard because, you know, our friends didn't really, I had a lot of support after our loss. And then I think after that, people also, when you deal with those kinds of things and they don't really know what to do after that point. And I had a conversation, I guess, around Sukkot with one of my friends. And I was just saying to her, it's like, you know, I'm the same person. Like, you can talk to me about the same things. I still, like, I might not want to hold your baby, but at the same time, I didn't want to hold your baby before anyway. So, like, that's not a change. I just, like, just need people to continue to, you know, be there for us. But I think just overall, it was just a feeling of just anger and the fact that I, you know, couldn't control, you know, at that point, I'm like, I'm trying all these things to, you know, I'm not in control, but I want to be in control.
Of course. Welcome.
So,
This is exactly what infertility and this struggle is in general, right? Like, we know that you can't just expect a miracle to, you know, to sound down from, you know, from the sky, that you have to put in the work. You have to, you know, go to the doctors. You have to seek out help. You have to do the hishtadlus piece. But also, like, there's only, like, that makes you think that you're in control. But the reality is that, of course, we know that we're never in control.
Yeah. But it's also like, it's like, how much do you want me to, like, how much hishtadlus do you want me to do to, you know, how was I not doing enough before? And now I have to do, you know, all these other steps along the process kind of thing. So I think it just got to the point where I just was very unhappy with, you know, I was like kind of questioning my choices in a sense. It's like, oh, I mean, but at the same time, then you see, you know, thank God we are blessed, and yes, we do have a son who, they also thought that through our challenges, they thought that he had some genetic stuff going on, and he does, thank God he does not. But I think just seeing, like, him and his now, like, interest and love in just school and Torah and Hashem, and I'm like, okay, like, I'm going to, like, try to at least, you know, get a little bit back on track for, you know, for him, and also, you know, my husband as well. My husband stopped. There was some, like, learning that he was doing as well in different classes.
Right. That was my next question.
Yeah.
How's your husband been through this?
So I think after that loss, he stopped learning at least certain classes that he was going to. He stopped. And he also, I don't know if anger was the right emotion that he was feeling, but he definitely was feeling to the point where, you know, you're alone in the community, and there's, you know, we had friends reach out at the beginning, but then, like, not really so much. So he just felt more alone in a sense. And I think at some point I had a conversation with one of my friends about it, and she was
about
like,
the loss, or about the halachic infertility?
About just the feelings that we were having with the loss, and then going into halachic infertility as well, because that's what we were starting to deal with at the time.
Right.
And she was just so confused as to how he could have such strong emotions about it. I'm like, I don't. We just always, like, put the men to the back, because they're also, you know, dealing with the challenges. Yes, they're not dealing with it inwardly because it's our bodies,
right?
But at least at least halachic infertility and losses wise, but, you know, they're still dealing with it emotionally, and I think sometimes we just, you know, forget about them in a sense. So he definitely stopped for good amount of time until recently he started picking some things back up. And I think it's the same thing with me now that I'm at a point where, you know, I feel like we're in the next step of this journey and trying to feel a little bit more positive about things, that, you know, I'm also feeling a little bit less anger and resentment towards everything. It takes time, and every day is different. So but
Tell me about who you reached out to about this. Someone asked, what does support look like? Like who you reached out to, yes, about your losses, but also specifically about this. And were people able to understand? Were people able to be helpful? Talk to me a little bit about that.
it's both. So as I
Yeah.
said, I remember talking to like a friend at some aspect, and she was like, "That's a thing. The Halachic infertility is a thing." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it is." I mean, I guess it's not. I think the religious communities are always like a step behind in some aspects of being, outward and open about certain topics, and I think they've definitely gotten a little bit further in terms of infertility conversations. But halachic infertility is definitely not one of those. I mean, because I know a ton of people who have done IVF and IUIs based on other types of infertility, but not this. So I actually have when I was in college, and I was going through that organization called Mayor. Most of my friends had graduated before me. And then when I came back in that fall, I got closer to kind of she was an intern, older, who worked for the organization, and I spent a little bit more time with her. And so now, she's older and married and in another state, but we talk fairly often. It's funny because she was on letrozole around the same time I was on letrozole, so we were just talking back and forth about it. Now, her struggles are different than my struggles in terms of it's not halachic infertility for her, but, she's been very supportive in the point of, support could be just sending a text and saying, like, thinking of you, or how are you, or,
Right.
inviting for, Shabbat or the holiday meals. I think that was a little bit tricky over time. I feel like I've gotten to the point where I'm a little bit more comfortable now with like pushing ourselves for invitations or asking, but I think sometimes it does feel like we're the ones still asking after all of the challenges that we've gone through, rather than being asked. And then people kind of like, especially with the halachic infertility, at least my coworkers, which they're just, within the secular community, so they don't understand it. So they listen to me, but I bet you they look at me like I'm, have like three heads sometimes with what I'm talking about. And, I think for me, support is just reaching out. I don't need like, lots of conversations about everything that's going on, but just, sending us texts and checking in and just seeing how everything's going. And, I think everybody's going through their own challenges, whether it's through this or just other things in their lives that we just forget about other things that are going on. And especially with halachic infertility, I feel like it's not something outwardly that people kind of talk about. So they don't understand, first of all. And then I just don't think people know how to, not to feel bad about it, but how to like communicate about that in a sense.
Right. I think that, support, I mean, from our perspective as an organization, support looks like having conversation about it, right? And that's exactly what we're doing here, that we're opening up the conversation and saying that this is a thing that people are going through in your community, whether you know it or not. And like it falls under the umbrella of general circumstantial infertility. It's not the fact that the egg can't meet the sperm, because it can. It just, Jewish law is not allowing for that. And so, it's the old, like, it's exactly what you just said, Jenna, like everybody's going through something.
Right.
And
I mean, I've had comments where people are like, well, why can't you just do another medication, or you can do an IUI, or you can do IVF? I was like, it doesn't really, that's not the point of this. It's not like, why can't you do this? And those things, as well as we've said, can cost a lot of money for someone, and it's also time consuming, and it's stressful, and it's, you know, not the best thing for everyone. But I think I made, right. And it doesn't always work. Like you could do,
Correct.
I've had, you know, I've had friends who've done multiple IUIs and it just didn't work.
Right.
So, but I'm in like a couple of groups and I posted something about it at some point, at the beginning of this process, and was like, has anybody dealt with this before? Like, what do you do? Because like my doctor's saying this medication, but it's not doing anything. And there was a comment that someone made. I was like, I was dealing with this for 10 years, like halachic infertility for 10 years.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, she definitely had to be, you know, older, and, you know, who knows what was going on during the time when she was trying to have kids. But I'm just like, 10 years, that is not okay for us to not be talking about this and bringing light to, you know, the situation, and just making sure that, you know, as we've said, someone said, like, talk to your LOR, but at least, like, be able to have more people that are knowledgeable in the area so that you don't also have to, like, jump around to find the right person to ask.
Correct. Look, I think that's exactly it. You know, this is not something that you are the only one going through. I don't know that I don't know that statistics exist out there as to how many people are going through this. But we know, generally speaking, that, you know, the range of women's cycles, there are some that have long cycles, some that have short cycles, and some that have average cycles. That's the reason why an average cycle exists, right? So it means that some are having long and some are having shorter. So that's how we get averages. So this is out there, and this discussion was meant to open up the conversation, let people know that this exists and that we are there to help support, because this is an emotional burden for people to carry, that you want to be, you know, it's exactly as you just said, right? That, you know, we're holding fast and we're observing these laws. People are observing these laws because we believe in the general idea of, you know, keeping the laws strictly. And yet when the laws also say, one of the laws also are, you know, be fruitful and multiply. But when the laws themselves are preventing you from being fruitful and multiplying, I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
Right. And like contradicting themselves at that point. And then you know, you're just questioning a lot of things.
Correct.
Correct.
So that's why we're here. You know, look, I know that if there are other people that are going through this and they want to reach out to you, they definitely can. Will Jenna, so this is a question. Would Jenna be comfortable giving her Hebrew name so that we can pray for her?
Sure. It's not, as I said, this is just a preface. As I said, my family is not religious. So my Hebrew name is very stereotypical for the 90s, which, so my Hebrew name is Yosefa Brindle Bas Chaya Sarah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I've come to love it over time, but it took a really long time to enjoy, you know, back in the day when they were making more masculine names feminine. It's fine.
Yes. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. But, you know, what I'll say to all of you as a community is that, you know, if there are enough people who want to talk about this and want to be, you know, coordinated into a group, then, you know, we can take a survey and see if people want a support group. Maybe we do it, you know, once every other month and bring people together. We absolutely can do that. And we'll put up a question box and see if people are interested. But the bottom line is that whoever is out there dealing with this, you are not alone. And even though there are medicines and even though there is medical science to work around it, it you know, sometimes is not a quick fix, but that there are other people out there that are going through this, and we can help bring you together and help you to feel that you are not wading through this horribleness alone. Last thoughts, Jenna.
I think that's really the main aspect as to why I started sharing. I mean, I started sharing because of my losses, but then once we started going through this struggle and you realize that people didn't know that this was a thing, that it just got to the point where you know, I felt a little alone, and I didn't want others to feel alone. So I just think, you know, even if that's just not your personality and you don't, you know, want to share, which not everybody does, it's just, I think it's just important for those to realize that there are other people going through this challenge, and that it's not just you. And it's hard for everyone, and whatever emotions that you're feeling, as I said, I wasn't as like sad, I wasn't really crying or any of these things, but you know, any emotions that you are feeling are completely understandable and are okay. Just know that there's people obviously like Aimee and other organizations out there that are there for you as well.
Absolutely. Okay. All right, everybody. We are sending love to all of you and hoping that you found a little bit of comfort and a little bit of strength in Jenna's words. You can reach out to her directly through her Instagram handle. That's going to be tagged here. Or if you want me to reach out to her, I'm happy to do that as well. In the meantime, we are sending you lots of love and lots of hugs. Thank you, Jenna, so much.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.